So imagine spending $20,000 on a meticulously planned marriage proposal.
Oh, wow. That is a lot of money.
Right, we are talking renting out a historic castle, hiring a live string quartet, covering the stone floors in imported rose petals. I mean, the whole 9 yards.
Sounds like the ultimate romantic fantasy.
Exactly. And you get down on one knee with a flawless diamond. She says yes. She cries, she takes the photos, she posts the ring on all her social media feeds with the little heart eyes emojis.
And the digital congratulations just start pouring in.
Yeah. And for most of us, if the story ended right there, it would be the ultimate triumph, you know?
Yeah, total success story.
But what if, exactly 3 days later, she completely ghosts you?
Just completely vanishes.
Completely. No phone call, no explanation, just a total vanishing act.
That is brutal.
Right. And for the average person listening to this right now, that scenario is a bizarre, heart-wrenching tragedy.
Oh, absolutely.
But for the author of the controversial war manual we are unpacking today, it's not a tragedy at all. It is just simple, ruthless, predictable mathematics. Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah, it is a really bracing place to start, but that scenario perfectly encapsulates the architectural shift we are going to be dissecting today.
It really does.
Because the old maps of human courtship and societal expectation, they simply do not apply to the terrain this author claims we are currently walking on.
And that is exactly the terrain we are dropping into. We are thrilled to have you, the listener, here with us.
So glad you are joining us.
Before we step into the thick of this incredibly dense material, a quick reminder to you. Please take a second right now to like and subscribe to the show.
Yes, please do.
It really supports the channel and allows us to keep doing these massive, unvarnished explorations of the sources shaping our world. Because today, our mission is a heavy one.
Very heavy.
We are conducting a deep dive into a newly published ebook titled Life Unscripted.
Subtitled Navigating the Manosphere and Reclaiming Your Masculinity.
Right, written by Conrad Reicher. And right out of the gate, you need to know, this book does not claim to be a gentle, step-by-step self-help guide.
Not at all.
It explicitly frames itself as a war manual for men trying to survive in the machinery of modern society.
It really takes a sledgehammer to modern dating, family courts, corporate culture, evolutionary biology, and the male mental health crisis.
It covers so much ground. And for those of you who want to examine the source material for yourselves after we break it down, the book is available to buy right now on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
But before we go a single step further into Reicher's text, we have to establish the absolute ground rules for today's deep dive.
Yes, this is crucial.
This is a non-negotiable disclaimer. The source material we are unpacking today contains highly politically charged, explicitly anti-feminist, and what is commonly referred to in internet culture as red-pilled content stemming from the manosphere.
Right.
As your guides through this material today, we must be unequivocally clear. We are not endorsing, we are not validating, and we are not taking sides on any of the viewpoints, ideologies, or political conclusions presented by the author.
Completely impartial.
Exactly. Our mission here is strictly, rigorously analytical. We are going to unpack, impartially report on, and examine the foundational arguments contained within Reicher's text.
We are doing this so that you, the listener, can understand the architecture of this specific worldview, which is gaining massive traction online.
We are looking exclusively at the what, the how, and the why of his arguments, nothing more.
Okay, let's unpack this, because Reicher's foundational premise sets a very aggressive stage right in Chapter 1.
He really pulls no punches.
No, he doesn't. He introduces a concept he calls the fematrix, or the gynocratic script.
Which is quite the term.
Yeah, it is. His core argument is that modern society has completely systematically reprogrammed how men are valued at a baseline level.
Right. He argues the culture no longer views men as inherently valuable human beings.
Exactly. He says they are viewed as disposable utilities. The specific phrases he uses in the text are tax mules and human Kleenex.
Human Kleenex. Wow.
Yeah, it's intense. He claims that the modern sexual economy, the way men and women meet, mate, and assign value to one another, is fundamentally rigged against the average guy.
And he brings in some specific math for this, right?
He does. He states it operates on a harsh 80-20 Pareto split.
The Pareto principle.
Right, meaning 80% of men are left fighting for absolute scraps, while the top 20% of men reap all of the romantic and sexual rewards.
The application of the Pareto principle here requires some unpacking, I think.
Yeah, please break that down for us.
Well, Reicher isn't just using it as a loose metaphor. Originally, the Pareto distribution is an economic concept observed by Vilfredo Pareto in the 19th century.
He was an Italian economist, right?
Exactly. He noted that 80% of the land in Italy was owned by 20% of the population. It's a mathematical power law.
Okay.
What Riker is doing is mapping this exact mathematical model onto human sexual dynamics.
How so?
He argues that prior to the digital age, geographic limitations and societal monogamy enforced a more even distribution.
So you competed with the 50 guys in your village or your neighborhood.
Exactly. But Riker argues that digital dating apps have hyperinflated this disparity by creating a globalized, frictionless marketplace.
Wait, walk me through the mechanics of that. How exactly does an app mathematically enforce an 80-20 split? Isn't it just people swiping on who they find attractive?
Well, it is the underlying algorithm of the platforms. Riker specifically points to the ELO rating system.
Like in chess.
Yes, originally designed for ranking chess players, which dating apps adapted to rank human attractiveness.
Wow, okay.
When you join an app, the algorithm tracks your swipe data, who swipes right on you, and the attractiveness score of the people swiping on you.
So it's constantly grading you behind the scenes.
Exactly. If highly rated profiles swipe left on you, your hidden score drops. And Riker cites data suggesting that women on these apps swipe right on only about 4 to 5% of male profiles, whereas men swipe right on over 50% of female profiles.
That is a massive disparity in selectivity.
It is. Because of that disparity, the algorithm quickly buries the bottom 80% of men, making their profiles virtually invisible.
So they're literally just swiping into the void.
Pretty much. Meanwhile, the algorithm takes the top 20% of men, the ones getting the right swipes, and puts them at the very top of the feed for 100% of the women.
So it creates a mathematical feedback loop where the middle class of dating is entirely wiped out by the code itself.
Precisely his point. Riker argues this isn't just bad luck for the average guy, it is algorithmic invisibility.
Which brings us back to that jarring story I mentioned at the top of the show.
The $20,000 proposal.
Yeah. Riker uses the anecdote of Mike, the 34-year-old engineer. From a traditional standpoint, Mike is doing everything right.
He has a solid career, he's stable, he's planning for the future.
Exactly. He executes this massive proposal. He gets the social media validation, and then 3 days later, he is completely ghosted. Just vanishes.
It's just wild to think about.
It really is. And Riker pairs this terrifying anecdote with a data point that he uses to explain the ghosting.
It's a data point.
He cites a 2022 Psychology Today study claiming that 68% of women under 30 admit to holding backup options in their romantic lives.
The crucial element here is how Riker uses Mike's story as a diagnostic tool for his readers.
Right.
He isn't presenting Mike to garner sympathy. In fact, Riker is highly critical of Mike.
Why is he critical of him? Mike got his heart broken.
He argues that Mike's $20,000 proposal was a symptom of a man operating on an outdated, romanticized script. He calls it the Disney model.
Ah, okay.
Because he's doing this in a world that now operates on ruthless, algorithmic efficiency.
So Mike was essentially playing a game that doesn't exist anymore.
Exactly. Riker's argument is that Mike was playing a chivalry simulator. He was investing massive, irreplaceable capital into a system where his partner, mathematically speaking, likely had immediate low-friction access to dozens of other men right in her pocket.
Because of the apps.
Right. Riker uses that 68% backup option statistic to argue that modern commitment is largely an illusion.
That is incredibly cynical.
It is. He says commitment is contingent entirely on the immediate absence of a better, frictionless alternative provided by the digital marketplace.
It makes me think of modern dating apps as a rigged digital casino.
That's a good analogy.
You walk in, the lights are flashing, the interface is completely gamified with little dopamine hits every time you get a match. But the house edge is so steep that you're essentially just walking through the doors to act as an ATM for the establishment.
That is exactly how he portrays it.
But my question reading this section was, is Riker arguing that the real enemy is the technology, like the Tinder swiping mechanics and social algorithms? Or is he saying there's been a fundamental shift in human societal values?
Which one is the chicken and which is the egg?
Exactly.
Well, he argues that it is a toxic synthesis of both, but biology is the foundational layer.
Shall we unpack that for me?
He believes that the fundamental shift in societal values, meaning removing the cultural guardrails that historically promoted monogamy, created the permissive environment.
So the environment changed first.
Right, and the algorithms simply weaponize human biology within that environment.
Ah, I see.
The algorithm exploits primal evolutionary desires, but removes the social friction and community judgment that used to keep communities stable.
So nobody's judging you for swiping endlessly anymore.
Exactly. But he goes further than just a sociological critique. Riker argues this digital saturation is literally physiologically changing men.
Physiologically.
Yes. He claims that the constant barrage of dating apps, OnlyFans, and social media validation is chemically castrating men.
Chemically castrating, that is an incredibly heavy term to throw around.
It is.
How does he justify that biologically?
He bases this on the mechanics of the human limbic system, specifically dopamine regulation.
Dopamine, the reward chemical.
Right. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter responsible for motivation and reward pursuit. In a natural environment, a man gets a dopamine hit after a long, difficult pursuit.
Like hunting an animal or building a shelter?
Or historically, courting a partner over months or years. It requires massive exertion.
So it's hard-earned dopamine.
Exactly. Riker argues that digital apps flood the male brain with unearned synthetic dopamine.
Because it's so easy.
Right. When a man scrolls through hundreds of highly curated, digitally altered images of women, his brain registers this as a massive reproductive abundance.
Oh, wow. So the brain thinks it's succeeding.
Yes, it floods his receptors. Over time, the brain downregulates its own dopamine production to compensate for the flood.
Which means?
This leaves the man lethargic, unmotivated, and biologically pacified.
So he just loses his drive entirely.
He loses his drive to achieve in the real world because his brain believes he has already conquered the reproductive hierarchy digitally.
That is fascinating. Which explains one of his major tangible prescriptions in the book, the dopamine diet.
Yes, the dopamine diet.
If you're listening and wondering how Riker tells his readers to fix this, it's not through therapy.
No, not at all.
He tells his readers to completely block all apps and screens after 6 p.m. He tells them to read Marcus Aurelius and to go lift heavy objects until their hands literally bleed.
Which sounds extreme.
Initially, yeah, it sounds like extreme internet tough guy posturing.
Yeah.
But he's actually framing it as a physiological, anti-parasitic intervention.
Yes. He views the smartphone not as a neutral communication tool, but as a biological parasite feeding on male motivation.
So the dopamine diet is his attempt to force a hard physiological reset.
Precisely. By starving the brain of synthetic digital dopamine, he aims to force the brain to upregulate its sensitivity to natural endorphins and serotonin.
Which you only get through physical strain and tangible accomplishment.
Right. He gives an example of a reader who quit all social media, learned how to weld, and started making over $200,000 a year building custom ranch gates.
Wow.
Riker's point is that the welding and the physical labor reconnected the man's reward system to tangible reality.
Which subsequently completely changed his confidence and his position in the dating pool.
It's all about reclaiming the physical world over digital servitude.
But if we follow Riker's logic to the next chapter, the digital world is just the waiting room.
Just the beginning.
Because if the dating apps are the rigged casino, he views the physical legal institution of marriage as the actual vault where the grand heist happens.
The ultimate trap, in his view.
And I have to say, the transition in the text from talking about algorithms to talking about the court system is jarring.
That is because this is where his rhetoric shifts from cultural and biological critique to outright institutional warfare.
He goes hard against the courts.
Very hard. He views the family court system as the enforcement arm of the fee matrix he described earlier.
The language he uses here is intensely corporate. He calls marriage a leveraged buyout where men are the asset class.
A leveraged buyout.
That phrasing is so deliberate. He's completely stripping away any concept of romance, love, or spiritual union and framing the marriage contract as a hostile corporate raid.
And he has the statistics to back up his framing.
He does. The text claims that 80% of all divorces are initiated by women. And he points out a specific data point. The IRS collecting $14 billion in back child support in a single year.
$14 billion.
Yes. He's framing the state, the government, not as a neutral arbiter of justice, but as a heavily armed collections agency acting on behalf of ex-wives.
What's fascinating here is let's examine the mechanics of that leveraged buyout metaphor, because it reveals exactly how Riker views the legal structure of modern marriage.
Okay, yeah, break that down for us.
In finance, a leveraged buyout is when a company is purchased using a significant amount of borrowed money. with the assets of the company being acquired used as collateral for the loans.
Okay, standard corporate raider stuff.
Right. Riker is arguing that in a modern marriage, the man's future earnings, his labor, and his physical assets are the collateral.
So the man is the company being bought out.
Exactly. And the state provides the leverage through no-fault divorce laws.
Wow.
If the marriage dissolves, the state extracts the assets from the man to compensate the woman, regardless of who broke the social contract of the marriage.
And he uses these composite anecdotes to really drive the financial terror of this mechanism home to the reader.
Yes, the Beta Brian story.
Right. He introduces a character he calls Beta Brian. Brian is a cloud architect. He works 80-hour weeks, grinding away to provide a high standard of living, which includes buying his wife a brand new Mercedes.
A great provider, supposedly.
According to the anecdote, the wife takes the Mercedes out, drives drunk, and totals the vehicle. They get divorced.
And what happens in the court?
The court looks at their financial dynamic and orders Brian to pay her $4,000 a month in alimony. Riker uses this to argue that a man's pure productivity is actually weaponized against him. He calls alimony a reverse dowry that funds his ex-wife's new lifestyle, while Brian is reduced to living in an extended stay motel.
The reverse dowry concept is central to Riker's critique of the legal system.
Can you explain that historical context?
Sure. Historically, a dowry was wealth transferred from the bride's family to the groom to ensure her financial security in a patriarchal system where women couldn't easily own property.
Okay, so it's a safety net.
Exactly. Riker argues that modern family courts have inverted this, forcing men to continuously transfer wealth to women long after the partnership has ended.
Even though we are in a modern era where women have equal access to the workforce and property ownership.
Yes. He argues the legal system has not updated to reflect modern economic realities, and therefore operates purely as a wealth extraction engine targeting male productivity.
So if a man accepts that premise, that the legal system is a wealth extraction engine waiting to dismantle him, how does Riker suggest he survive?
This leads to some of the most paranoid, or, from his perspective, purely pragmatic advice in the entire book.
He introduces a framework he calls the Vanilla Sky Protocol.
These are his advanced asset protection and legal evasion strategies.
Exactly. He's advising his readers to utilize offshore Cook Islands trusts,
which are notoriously difficult to penetrate.
He tells them to set up Wyoming LLCs with incredibly boring, innocuous names. He uses the example Karen's Horse Therapy to hide their stock portfolios, their business assets, and their real estate.
So they basically disappear on paper.
Right. He even talks about transferring the deed of your primary residence to an LLC before you even propose, so that legally you own nothing on paper.
It's all about becoming a ghost in the financial system.
And the reason he says men must do this is because of how family disputes are handled. He cites Department of Justice statistics claiming 80% of temporary restraining orders, or TROs, are filed by women.
And what does he claim about these TROs?
He claims these are often filed without any corroborating physical evidence, acting as a tactical nuke in divorce negotiations to immediately force the man out of the house and sever his access to his children.
To understand why he advises these specific tools, we have to explain the mechanics of how they actually work against the U.S. legal system.
Yeah. How does a Cook Islands Trust protect you from a California judge?
Well, a Cook Islands Trust is a legal entity located in a sovereign jurisdiction that does not recognize United States court judgments.
Oh, wow.
If a family court judge in California orders a man to hand over half his assets in a divorce, and those assets are sitting in a Cook Islands Trust, the U.S. judge has no jurisdictional authority to compel the foreign trustee to release the funds.
So the judge is basically powerless.
The judge can hold the man in contempt, but the money is legally untouchable.
That is wild. What about the Wyoming LLC?
Similarly, a Wyoming LLC provides what is called charging order protection.
What does that mean?
It means a creditor or an ex-spouse cannot seize the underlying assets of the company. They can only place a lien on distributions.
So if the company never distributes any money,
the ex-spouse gets absolutely nothing, but they still might have to pay taxes on the phantom income.
oh, that's almost vindictive.
Riker is essentially teaching men how to build financial bunkers that weaponize corporate law against family law.
But wait, this is where I have to push back hard on his underlying logic. I was reading this section and thinking, if you have to approach a romantic relationship like you're Jason Bourne,
setting up offshore shell companies,
memorizing crypto seed phrases, and hiding them in the salad drawer of your fridge just to avoid being financially assassinated by a family court judge. hasn't the concept of partnership already categorically failed?
It's a very fair question.
I mean, you are sleeping next to someone while maintaining a CIA-level operational security dossier on them. You are assuming they are a latent enemy combatant.
Yeah.
How is that a functional life? Doesn't that level of paranoia actually manifest the exact betrayal he's trying to avoid?
It is a profound philosophical question. Does the armor invite the war?
Exactly.
Riker's counterargument to you would be that the naive expectation of a Disney partnership is exactly the blind spot that gets men slaughtered in family court.
So he just doesn't believe in the partnership to begin with.
He argues that the partnership has already failed, but not on an individual level. It has failed on a societal, structural level.
Because of the laws.
Because the legal system financially incentivizes the dissolution of the marriage, you cannot trust the individual because the individual is operating within a corrupted incentive structure.
So you're not fighting her, you're fighting the state.
From his view, you aren't fighting the woman you love. You are preemptively fighting the state's financial incentives that she will inevitably be tempted to use.
Oh.
The Wyoming LLCs and the hidden crypto wallets are just the modern chainmail required to step onto the battlefield of modern matrimony. He would say you're choosing between being paranoid and being impoverished, and he chooses paranoia.
That distinction is fascinating. He isn't saying women are inherently evil. He is saying they are operating within a system that makes betraying the man incredibly lucrative.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the really uncomfortable and highly controversial evolutionary argument at the center of the book.
Because if being the good guy doesn't work, what does?
Right. If being a good provider, the traditional beta bucks guy working 80 hours to buy the Mercedes, is a trap, what does Riker say women actually want?
Here is where he pivots heavily into evolutionary psychology.
And he brings up the dark triad of personality traits.
Right. Narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. These are the three pillars of the dark triad in psychology.
And Riker's argument here is completely countercultural. Society constantly tells men to be vulnerable, to be emotionally open, to communicate their feelings, and to prioritize consent and equality.
It's what every modern therapist tells you.
But Riker claims that a woman's primal biological circuitry is actually triggered almost like a slot machine paying out by those exact dark triad traits.
And he uses some extreme examples.
He really does. He points to extreme, real-world examples that are hard to ignore. He brings up the fact that the notorious serial killer Ted Bundy had literal groupies showing up to his trial, sending him marriage proposals in prison.
Which is a documented phenomenon.
Yeah. He mentions a modern anecdote of a guy named Derek, a convicted bank robber whose mugshot went viral online and who subsequently received 1,200 Tinder messages from women while sitting in a jail cell.
1,200 messages for a bank robber.
How on earth does Riker explain that from a biological standpoint?
Well, to explain this, we have to delve into the evolutionary psychology frameworks that Riker is citing.
Okay, let's hear it.
What Riker is doing here is pointing to the extreme pathological outliers, like a serial killer or a bank robber, to prove a baseline biological rule about female attraction.
Right.
He relies heavily on theories of pathogen stress environments and Paleolithic survival.
What does that mean, pathogen stress?
In a chaotic ancestral environment hundreds of thousands of years ago, survival was incredibly tenuous. You faced constant threats from predators, starvation, disease, and competing tribes.
Okay, very high stakes.
Extremely high. In that environment, a mate who exhibited pure altruism or vulnerability was likely to be killed, leaving the female and her offspring unprotected.
So the vulnerability that modern therapists praise was actually an evolutionary death sentence back then.
According to this evolutionary model, yes. Therefore, females evolved to select for men who displayed dominance, capacity for violence, and strategic cunning.
Which translates to the dark triad today.
Exactly. Narcissism provides the illusion of supreme confidence and self-belief, signaling high status.
Makes sense.
Machiavellianism provides strategic resource extraction, the ability to outwit competitors.
Okay.
And psychopathy provides fearlessness, lack of hesitation, and the capacity for necessary violence. Riker cites research suggesting that ovulating women, in particular, are biologically hardwired to seek out these dominant, high testosterone, dangerous men because those traits meant survival in the wild.
So he's saying the modern, well-meaning guy who asks for verbal consent to hold hands on a first date is fighting against hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary programming that inherently favors the pirate.
Yes. The text actually quotes a prominent manosphere figure, Rush V, who stated, "Women don't want equality, they want pirates with good credit scores."
Pirates with good credit scores. That is quite the visual.
Riker argues that modern society actively pathologizes and heavily medicates natural male predator instincts.
Like what instinct?
Things like hypercompetitiveness, aggression, dominance, and territoriality. Boys are drugged in grade school for displaying them.
Right, with ADHD meds and stuff?
Yes, yet the adult dating market simultaneously and ruthlessly rewards those exact same instincts.
So you're punished for it as a boy, but rewarded for it as a man.
This creates a massive, paralyzing cognitive dissonance for the modern man. He is told to be a pacifist, but he's only rewarded with reproduction when he acts like a conqueror.
This philosophy also heavily influences his advice on physical presence. Riker doesn't just talk about psychological dominance, he focuses on physical mass.
Right, the iron law of verticality.
Yes, he brings up a concept coined by another manosphere creator, Ryan Stone. The law states, if you can't grow up, grow out.
Meaning height.
Exactly. Meaning if a man is biologically short, say, under 6 feet tall, which apps severely penalize, he must compensate with sheer, undeniable physical mass.
Because he can't change his height.
Right. Riker talks about a client who was 5'8". On Tinder, he was totally invisible. But this client spent 3 years putting on 37 pounds of dense muscle.
37 pounds!
Suddenly, his height wasn't an issue, because his physical width and imposing presence overrode the vertical deficit in the primal brain of the women he met.
It is the biological signaling of formidability. If you cannot signal genetic height, you must signal kinetic potential.
But it's not just actual physical reality. Riker also exposes the immense illusion of status within this exact culture.
This part is so revealing.
This was one of the most revealing parts of the book for me. He drops a statistic claiming that 61% of male influencers fake their own material or lifestyle.
61%.
He details the story of a fitness influencer named Chad Steele. Online, Chad is the ultimate alpha crypto bro. Cars, women, aggressive motivational speeches telling men to conquer their reality.
We've all seen those profiles.
Right, but Riker reveals that Chad secretly hired a 55-year-old grandmother, a freelance writer, to ghostwrite his raw, unfiltered masculine posts for $8 an hour.
That perfectly highlights the performative nature of the modern manosphere itself.
It's all a show.
It is. Riker is paradoxically a part of this ecosystem, but he is also brutally critiquing it. He notes that the illusion of status has always been a mating strategy.
The fake it till you make it.
Exactly. He points out that even Roman emperors outsourced their war speeches to rhetoricians. Status, whether in ancient Rome or on Instagram, has always been a performance designed to hack the social hierarchy.
So the grandmother writing the alpha posts is just the modern equivalent of a medieval king wearing armor he didn't forge.
Exactly.
But if I'm looking at this entire dark triad section critically, I have to ask about sustainability. Comparing the dark triad appeal to a sugar rush makes logical sense to me.
Sure.
Yes, a smirk, a leather jacket, and a total lack of empathy might hack the biological circuitry for initial short-term sexual attraction. But is Riker confusing short-term survival and mating tactics with the requirements for a long-term legacy?
That's the big question.
You cannot build a stable family, raise well-adjusted children, or build a lasting community on a foundation of Machiavellianism and psychopathy. Those traits destroy communities. They isolate the individual.
Your critique centers on the difference between mating effort and parenting effort. Riker actually addresses this, though his conclusion is grim. Riker acknowledges the extreme volatility and destructiveness of the dark triad. He doesn't deny it.
Okay, so he admits it's destructive.
He does, but he asserts that in the current hyper-competitive algorithmic market, the sugar rush is the only thing that gets a man through the door.
So it's a necessary evil.
The problem, as Riker sees it, is that the beta strategy of long-term provisioning, being a good, stable father and husband, has been rendered economically obsolete by the modern welfare state.
How does the welfare state do that?
He says the state now acts as a substitute husband, providing a baseline of financial security to single mothers.
Oh, wow.
Therefore, a woman no longer strictly needs the beta provider for physical survival. Because that need is gone, she's free to optimize purely for the alpha dark triad genetic traits.
That is a dark way to view society.
It is. Therefore, Riker argues, the only viable strategy left for a man is to adopt the alpha traits to gain access, but maintain those ironclad legal boundaries, like the prenups and the offshore LLCs we discussed, self-preservation. Wow, okay.
It is a highly cynical, highly defensive posture where true community is deemed impossible.
And that profound defensive posture stems from a place of deep existential crisis, which brings us to the darkest and arguably the most sobering section of this entire deep dive.
This is a very heavy section.
If we move past the dating mechanics and the legal evasion, Riker points to what he calls the crisis of meaning. He focuses heavily on the male suicide epidemic.
This is a critical pivot in the text. This is where the tone of the book shifts completely from tactical, aggressive posturing to a stark statistical examination of massive societal casualties.
He pulls data from Warren Farrell, a very prominent researcher on men's issues, pointing out that male suicide rates are staggeringly high compared to women.
Yes.
And he pairs this with World Health Organization data from 2022 that is genuinely terrifying. The data shows that for every 1% spike in national unemployment, male suicide rates rise by 1.6%.
It's a direct correlation.
Riker frames economic downturns not just as recessions where people lose their savings, but as literal hit lists for men, because their value is entirely tied to their output.
Exactly. He argues that because society has tied a man's entire inherent value to his paycheck, the loss of that paycheck is the loss of his right to exist.
It ties directly back to his foundational premise in Chapter 1, the concept of male disposability.
Right.
When a man can no longer provide tangible utility, when he is no longer this tax mule society does not offer him a safety net of inherent, unconditional human value, it offers him an exit sign.
To make this abstract data real, he tells the story of another man named Mike, a different Mike from the Castle proposal.
Right, a 55-year-old Mike.
This Mike is 55 years old. He has worked blue-collar jobs his entire life, paid his taxes, raised his kids. During a corporate restructuring, he gets handed a pink slip.
He loses everything.
The story details Mike going into his garage, sitting at his workbench, and starting to polish a heavy steel wrench. While he is doing this, he is literally calculating the math in his head.
But the math of his life insurance.
Yes. Figuring out how much his life insurance policy will pay out, and whether it will be enough to cover his family's mortgage if he dies. He is actively, mathematically planning his own suicide, believing his death is financially optimal for his family.
That is just heartbreaking.
And what saves him isn't a crisis hotline. It isn't a modern therapist. What saves him are 6 men from his church parking lot.
His community.
Yeah, former Marines, mechanics, guys from his community who realize he hasn't shown up for a few days. They drive over to his house, find the garage locked, and literally kick down the heavy wooden door to pull him out of his own despair.
If we connect this intense anecdote to the broader biological picture Riker is painting, he is identifying a profound, lethal crisis of male isolation.
Because Mike was totally alone in that garage.
Right. He cites evolutionary psychologist David Buss to explain why those 6 men kicking down the door worked when therapy might not have.
What does Buss's data show?
Buss's data points out that in our ancestral environment, male coalitions hunting parties, perimeter defense groups, raiding parties, increased in individual man's survival odds by 400%.
400%. That's massive.
Men are biologically, neurologically wired to exist in tribal, shoulder-to-shoulder, task-oriented challenges.
And modernity has completely atomized them.
And precisely, we have systematically swapped the tribal hunting party for a solitary cubicle, a long commute, and a Zoom screen.
Totally unnatural.
Riker argues that modern men are suffocating from this lack of tribal integration. To prove that rebuilding this integration works, he points to an incredible real-world legislative solution.
Yes. Finland's men's shed law.
Right.
I had never heard of this before reading the book.
Yeah.
What exactly is a men's shed?
Finland recognized the male suicide crisis, particularly among older, jobless men. Instead of just funding more traditional talk therapy, the government funded the creation of communal, physical workspaces.
Like actual sheds.
These are literal large sheds or garages where men could go to rebuild motorcycle engines, do heavy carpentry, or weld metal.
Wow. So just working with their hands.
It gave them a place to just exist in a male-dominated, lateral, task-oriented space without the pressure of emotional articulation.
And did it work?
The data showed it cut the suicide rate among those specific demographics by 30%.
30%. Because they weren't sitting across from a therapist being asked, how does that make you feel? They were standing shoulder to shoulder with other men, rebuilding their dignity alongside the motorcycles.
Exactly.
And this mechanism leads directly to his other major societal prescription, the gym as the new church.
He leans very heavily into this.
He does. He cites CDC data indicating that men who engage in heavy resistance training, lifting weights 3 times a week, slash their suicide risk by 50%.
50% is huge.
He frames the iron rack, the barbell, as the last remaining altar in society where men are judged purely, objectively on merit. The barbell cannot be manipulated by social politics.
200 pounds is always 200 pounds.
Exactly. It doesn't care about your feelings, your background, or your excuses. It only cares if you possess the sheer kinetic force to move the weight against gravity.
But we must be careful to understand how Riker is deploying this advice. He isn't just talking about cardiovascular health or endorphins.
What's the deeper meaning for him?
He is weaponizing the gym as a political and spiritual sanctuary. He views physical strength as the absolute baseline requirement for personal sovereignty.
So if you're weak, you're vulnerable.
If you are physically weak, you are inherently reliant on the state for protection. And the state, in his overarching view, is structurally hostile to men. Therefore, physical weakness is political vulnerability.
But again, I have to push back on the totality of this solution. Replacing deep introspective therapy with the Iron Temple sounds like applying a heavy physical tourniquet to a deeply infected emotional wound.
It's a temporary fix.
Yes, a tourniquet stops the immediate bleeding, but it doesn't cure the underlying infection. Is lifting heavy weights in a garage gym just a modern artificial substitute for the tribal hunting party?
He would argue it's the closest thing we have.
But can moving dead weight actually replace the deep societal integration and purpose that men historically derived from building a community? Does this isolation strategy actually solve the biological drive for connection, or does it just selectively starve it?
Riker would argue that you are fundamentally misunderstanding male psychology if you think the emotional wound requires verbal unpacking to heal.
Oh, how so?
He is deeply skeptical of modern talk therapy, viewing it as a feminized institution that forces men to use vocabulary and face-to-face emotional processing methods that run completely counter to their evolutionary biology.
So talking just doesn't work for them.
He believes men process trauma and build emotional resilience through action, through physical exertion, and through overcoming shared obstacles laterally.
Meaning shoulder to shoulder, not face to face.
Exactly. The gym isn't a substitute for a hunting party in his view. The act of physical strain is the modern manifestation of the hunting party. He would argue that until society is completely restructured, the tourniquet is the only thing keeping the patient alive.
And while he advises building this impenetrable physical resilience in the gym, he makes it explicitly clear in the next section that physical strength is completely useless if your mind is captured.
This is where we get into institutional capture.
Yes. Which brings us to a massive shift in the book, his chapter on institutional warfare. This is where Riker zooms out from the individual man to the macro structures of society. For the listeners out there who really want to focus on understanding the history of our institutions before they were captured by feminists and Marxists, this is the core of his argument.
He believes modern institutions, corporate America, mainstream academia, and the media apparatus have been entirely systematically captured by these woke ideologies,
which are actively trying to re-educate the male population.
He frames this not as a passive cultural drift, but as a deliberate, systematic, institutional purge of masculine virtues and objective biological reality.
He brings up some incredibly stark examples to illustrate this institutional capture. He details the case of a 16-year-old boy in Ohio.
Oh, the high school debate.
Yes. This high school student was formally suspended from school for simply stating during a classroom debate that human males possess XY chromosomes and females possess XX chromosomes.
Basic biology.
Right. But the teacher and the administration labeled the statement transphobic misinformation and removed him from the educational environment.
Wow.
He also talks about the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C. He claims they ran an exhibit on historical innovation where they literally omitted Thomas Edison, the man who invented the light bulb, and replaced his spot with a modern group called the Transclusive Energy Collective.
This is where Riker transitions into political theory. He outlines what he calls the 4R playbook of institutional warfare.
The 4R playbook. Walk us through that.
He argues this is the exact sociological mechanism used by ideological groups to capture an institution. The 4 R's are rename, remove, retrain, ridicule.
Rename, remove, retrain, ridicule. Okay, how does that work in practice?
First, they rename male achievements or objective merit as the product of systemic privilege or collective luck.
Ah, so Edison didn't earn it, he was just privileged.
Exactly. Second, they remove evidence of biological reality, like suspending the boy from mentioning chromosomes.
Okay.
Third, they retrain the remaining men through corporate DEI seminars to apologize for their inherent nature.
And the 4th R?
Finally, they ridicule any traditional masculinity as inherently toxic or dangerous.
And he focuses heavily on the university system as the epicenter of this playbook. He tells the story of Dr. Robert S., a tenured professor of evolutionary psychology.
Tenured, meaning he should have had a job for life.
Exactly. But this professor had his tenure revoked, which is the academic equivalent of being executed, because he assigned a mainstream, scientifically rigorous book called The Evolution of Desire by David Buss.
The students protested.
The students in his class filed Title IX complaints, claiming that reading about evolutionary mating strategies triggered ancestral trauma.
Ancestral trauma.
Think about the mechanism there. An academic fired from a university for teaching baseline biology because the scientific reality made students emotionally uncomfortable.
And this creates a chilling effect across all universities.
Huge. Riker argues this single firing has led to a massive, invisible chilling effect. He cites a survey stating that 72% of academics now actively self-censor their research on gender, biology, or mating strategies out of pure fear for their livelihoods.
Riker draws a very stark, very dramatic historical parallel here to explain the stakes. He compares modern cancel culture and institutional capture to the Catholic Church burning Giordano Bruno at the stake in the year 1600.
Giordano Bruno, the philosopher.
Yes. Bruno was burned alive for claiming that the stars were actually distant suns surrounded by their own planets, a scientific reality that threatened the theological consensus of the time.
Because it went against the narrative.
Exactly. Riker views the red-pilled men, the manosphere creators, and these silenced evolutionary biologists as the modern heretics. He frames them as the last intellectual dissidents who are desperately trying to preserve objective, empirical reality while the institutional ministry of truth tries to burn it all down.
So, if the universities and the corporations are captured by the ministry of truth, what is his solution for the average man?
Creating a parallel structure.
Right, he talks about the creation of the Dissidents Library and these underground networks he calls Socrates societies.
Like the one in New York.
Yeah, he describes a specific one operating in New York City. You have Wall Street finance guys, former Marxist academics, and tech CEOs gathering in secret, unlisted cigar bars.
Sounds like something out of a movie.
It does. They drop their burner phones at the door to prevent recording, they drink whiskey, and they openly debate these banned evolutionary psychology PDFs and biological realities that would get them fired in their day jobs.
What he is describing is the deliberate creation of an intellectual underground, a parallel shadow economy of ideas.
Because they can't have these discussions in public.
Right, because Riker believes the mainstream institutions are fundamentally corrupted and beyond saving, he advocates for complete withdrawal from them. He wants men to create decentralized, unsanctionable networks of knowledge where truth can be discussed without the threat of a Title IX complaint or an HR firing.
But if you're listening to this, you have to ask, what does this actually accomplish? Is moving to an underground Socrates society in a basement, hiding your phone, to debate waist-to-hip ratios over bourbon a genuine intellectual revolution?
Or is it just an echo chamber?
Exactly. Is it just the creation of a new, equally isolated echo chamber? It feels like you're just trading one highly filtered, dogmatic reality for another while abandoning the actual public square.
It raises a vital question about the nature and utility of echo chambers. Riker would counter your point by arguing that an echo chamber based on empirical, replicable, evolutionary biology and mathematical reality is vastly superior to a mainstream institution based on ideological social constructionism.
I see his point there.
But you are correct that this strategy inherently isolates these men from the broader societal discourse. However, Riker's entire point is that he does not want to engage in the broader discourse.
He thinks engaging is a waste of time.
He believes engaging with a captured institution is a trap designed to drain your energy.
Which leads perfectly, via that exact logic of withdrawal, into the final segment of his book and the ultimate inevitable conclusion of his entire philosophy, the exit strategy.
The final move.
Because if you follow his logic, if the dating apps are rigged casinos, if marriage is a leveraged buyout waiting to bankrupt you, and if the institutions are re-education camps trying to silence you, what is left for a man to do?
The only winning move is not to play.
Riker's final answer is shockingly simple. Walk away entirely.
He fully embraces the MGTOW philosophy, men going their own way.
Right, and he profiles guys who are literally living this out in the physical world. He talks about Liam, a 22-year-old journeyman electrician.
What did Liam do?
Liam looked at the cost of a diamond ring, a wedding, a mortgage, and the statistical likelihood of divorce, and he just opted out.
Just walked away.
Instead, he bought a used cargo van, gutted the interior, installed his own solar panels, and now lives completely rent-free at mountain trailheads, working just enough to buy food.
Wow!
Liam's direct quote in the book is, "Freedom's my wife now." Riker praises this nomadland lifestyle not as poverty, but as the ultimate victorious rejection of the extraction system.
He elevates this concept to what he calls the sovereign father or the sovereign man. It is critical to understand that Riker is not simply advocating for traditional bachelorhood.
What's the difference?
Bachelorhood implies you are still participating in the broader societal engine. You are still consuming, paying massive taxes, and engaging with the culture. You just happen to be unmarried.
Okay, so what is Riker proposing?
The MGTOW philosophy Riker is proposing is a total, systemic, and deliberate withdrawal of male labor, male reproductive participation, and male capital from the state.
He calls it the sexual strike. And the examples of this strike are highly coordinated. He mentions a group called the Denver Pact.
The Denver Pact.
Yes, where 200 men secretly signed a binding agreement to absolutely withhold all marriage proposals and reproductive commitment until family custody laws are legally reformed in their state.
That is organized resistance.
It is. He talks about the staggering statistic of a 30% paternity fraud rate in certain demographics, and how men are fighting back, not in the courts, but through technology.
Using crypto.
He details how men in the manosphere are routing their child support payments and their excess wealth through untraceable Monero crypto wallets to literally starve the family courts of capital.
To understand the power of that, you have to understand the mechanics of Monero versus something like Bitcoin.
Yeah, how does Monero work?
Bitcoin is a public ledger. Anyone can trace the movement of funds. Monero utilizes complex cryptography, specifically ring signatures and stealth addresses, to completely obscure the sender, the receiver, and the amount transacted.
So it's totally hidden.
It is a financial black box. By moving their wealth into Monero, these men are rendering their economic productivity entirely invisible to the state. They are taking their financial leverage off the table.
Starving the beast.
But the most fascinating intellectual leap Riker makes in this final chapter is his reinterpretation of broader technology. He talks about Vitalik Buterin, the creator of the Ethereum blockchain.
Yes, this part blew my mind.
Riker frames the Ethereum white paper not just as a technological breakthrough in decentralized finance, but as a celibacy manifesto.
Yes. When I read that, I was floored. He calls Ethereum the NoFap++ mod.
Which is quite the term.
For listeners who don't know the niche internet slang, NoFap is an online movement where men abstain from pornography and masturbation to retain their drive. Riker is taking that concept and applying it to macroeconomic technological development.
Exactly. He is applying a sort of Freudian sublimation to the blockchain. He's suggesting that by actively withdrawing their sexual, romantic, and economic energy from a mainstream marketplace that mathematically devalues them, men can capture that immense primal biological drive and redirect it.
Let him go.
They can use that pent-up energy to build world-changing technology, parallel economies, and decentralized systems like cryptocurrency and private networks that the gynocracy and the state simply cannot tax, regulate, or control.
It's essentially the plot of Ayn Rand's famous novel, Atlas Shrugged, where the most productive members of society go on strike and retreat to a hidden valley.
Right.
But Riker is applying that exact concept specifically to gender, marriage, and reproduction. He's essentially saying to the modern man, the game is rigged. Take your ball and go home. But while you're at home, use your energy to build an impenetrable, decentralized fortress out of the ball so the state can never reach you again.
That is the exact operating metaphor of the entire book. He is asking men to stop building the roads for a society that hates them and to start building the lifeboats for their own survival.
It is an incredibly intense, unapologetic, and unvarnished worldview. And as we wrap up this massive deep dive, I want to remind you, our listener, one more time, our goal today was to objectively, rigorously break down the mechanics, the anger, the data, and the underlying evolutionary logic of Conrad Riker's highly controversial manual, Life Unscripted.
We must be clear again, we are not endorsing these views.
We're not telling you how to live your life. We are simply charting the map of this specific complex ideology that is gaining serious, undeniable traction in the shadows of the internet.
It is absolutely vital to understand the mechanics of these arguments, regardless of whether you agree with them or find them morally abhorrent. You must understand them because these ideas are currently shaping the financial behavior, the voting patterns, and the baseline psychology of a massive, growing demographic of modern men.
Absolutely. Ignoring it won't make it go away. And if you want to explore the original material and judge it for yourself, Riker directs his readers to follow him on his Substack at Conrad Riker.
Once again, the full book is available to purchase right now on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
I highly recommend checking it out if you want to see the source material.
I will leave you, the listener, with a final, unmentioned thought to ponder a logical extrapolation that builds on this entire exploration.
What's the thought?
If Riker's vision actually comes to pass, if a massive, multi-million demographic of young, highly capable, technically skilled men actually executes this sexual strike, completely withdrawing their economic productivity, their emotional investment, and their reproductive participation from society to live in untaxable, off-grid brotherhoods, what happens to the macroeconomic survival and the birth rate of the broader civilization in 50 years?
Wow.
Does the entire system eventually collapse under the weight of its own extraction without the tax mules to support it? Or does the society simply adapt, evolve, and learn to function completely without them?
That is a genuinely chilling question to end on. We are navigating a dense, dark forest where the old maps are currently burning. And it seems a significant number of men are deciding to just leave the forest entirely and build their own world in the ashes.
A new world altogether.
Thank you so much for joining us on this extensive deep dive. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the show for more rigorous explorations into the fascinating, sometimes terrifying sources shaping our world. We'll see you next time.